A mother shared this story. One day, she was heading up the stairs with a basket containing the last load of all the folded clothes from the laundry, and she was herding her 3 little ones in front of her. It was bedtime, and the eldest child, Lily, was then in grade 1, picked that moment to begin one of those questions which seemed to intrigue all children at some time. "Mommy," she asked, "if it were the end of the world and everyone was getting ready to die?" The mother stopped, shifted the basket on her hip, and said an ultra-quick prayer for wisdom to answer this question. "Yes," the mother prodded her daughter. The little girl finished her theological inquiry. "If the end of the world came, would you have to take your library books back?" Well, I think we have here a young lady who did not want any unfinished business in her life. And we know that we are coming close to Advent, when the liturgy gets us to think about the end times, about judgment. And we're invited to think not only of our final end in death, but about all the endings that we experience through our lives. And these days, there are more than the usual reasons for grief. And we are encouraged to reflect on what is permanent, what is sure in our lives. At the same time, we acknowledge what is passing, what's not worth the investment of our precious energy and time. So these days, the themes of death and limits are underlined and marked with exclamation points by the coronavirus pandemic which we are living through. And we need to ask ourselves, what is the focus of our lives? What can be taken away from us? What will accompany and sustain us through life's twists and sudden turns in these faith-testing days? So to help us to think about this, let's take a look at the Book of Wisdom. The author of the Book of Wisdom reminds us that one unfailing presence and guide for believers is wisdom. We have this wonderful description of wisdom. Wisdom is easily discerned by those who love her and is found by those who seek her. Wisdom just doesn't fall into our laps, in other words. We need to actively seek wisdom. We hear how wisdom is radiant and unfading. You know, it's so easy to put our confidence into stuff, the possessions I have. The things that I have, my possessions, will pass away. There will be another edition of my smartphone. There will be a new technology, and the one I have at the moment is useless, will become useless, I mean. But wisdom is unfading. And when life takes one of those twists on us, what have we to fall back on? What in our lives is radiant and unfading and can guide us through both the joys and sorrows? My natural reaction is to write an email and invite wisdom to come and make a home with me. But sadly, I don't think that will work. What we are encouraged to do is to watch and keep vigil for wisdom, for she will meet us in every thought. And I love the idea that all who seek wisdom shall find her, shall receive this gift of God. And what is required is a sincere, a seeking heart. And we seek wisdom through prayer, through study, reading, reflection, and working to understand who I am as a person. We look at 1 Kings, that's 3 verse 9. We are told that wisdom gives the seeker an understanding heart to judge and to distinguish right from wrong. That's wisdom. When we carry on reading the book of wisdom in chapter 7, we discover that when all else is passing, wisdom will guide us to what never fades. For she is the breath of the power of God, all-powerful and unchanging. And I think that's such a beautiful description. I'd love us to stay with that phrase. Wisdom is a breath of the power of God. And just to begin the search for wisdom is to be found by wisdom. And it's more gift than effort. And the effort comes in living a life faithful to the path that wisdom has shown us. For a Christian, Jesus is God's wisdom personified. And when we seek Jesus, we want to find the light that is radiant and unfading. And today we want to sit at the feet of Jesus and learn wisdom from him. We want to become wise in God's ways. We don't want to be deceived by things which pass away. And as we enter into the parable that we heard today, the parable of the 10 maidens, we meet customs from another world and another time. So what's it about? The bride and her attendants customarily waited at home for the arrival of the groom and his party. And in the parable, we heard how the groom was delayed. And so why might the groom be delayed? According to custom, the groom would be negotiating for the bride with the father and family. And the bartering could go on well into the night, even for days. Bartering at great length was considered a compliment and a sign that the bride was indeed treasured and priceless. And when both sides come to an agreement, the groom and his family attendants, they would arrive to take the bride to his home. And once there, the wedding feast would begin. And what a feast it would be! It could last for a week or even more. And so Jesus uses this slice of life as an illustration of his sudden return and the final and complete declaration of God's reign. We know the moment of reckoning is coming, but it's so easy to be like the 5 foolish maidens and become distracted and unprepared for the crucial moment of need. Look at the end of the parable for the 5 foolish maidens. It's the most abrupt and final saying. Then the door was shut. I can imagine a massive wooden door swinging closed, and then you get this beam of wood which you slot in and holds it fast, and no intruder would be able to get through. And so what was once open and inviting to the feasters is now locked and bolted. In a way, it reminds me of the crashing sound that prison gates make when they are closed behind you. But this is no prison. Those on the inside have an end to the long wait. They now enter into the wedding feast, the festival. Those outside are forever outside. And what an opportunity they missed by squandering their time and not getting the required oil for their lamp. How dull-witted they turned out to be. Had they been productive during the groom's delay, had they thought like the 5 wise maidens, they would have seen what was expected and required of them and acted on it, and they wouldn't have ended up in such dire circumstances. During these last 2 weeks, we've seen an increase in the number of infections and the number of deaths due to COVID-19 in our country. And the parable of 10 maidens points to a moment, not just to the end time, but also to now. It calls us to seize the moment, to direct our lives, guided by the wisdom God gives us in Christ. We do not yet see Christ coming, and what we experience are the multitude of endings caused by the virus. Some of these are like much changed routines of work, and might be online schooling or crammed schedules, or accustomed activities are simply put on hold. Fatigue from endless Zoom meetings, sometimes rather depressing daily news, and worry and impatience for a vaccine and all these things. So we can ask, how are we doing? How shall we respond? Well, it depends on how well we have tended to our oil supply, our oil for our lamps. And if we have squandered it with neglect or missed opportunities, then when we look for a backup in a moment of crisis, we may be left outside to the sound of a slamming and bolted door. It's too late. But it's not, The parable's bolted door hasn't happened yet. And Jesus reminds us now, we still have time. God is available to us now with the gift of wisdom to show us what we must do to keep a good supply of oil for our lamps. Remember, wisdom hastens to make herself known to those who desire her. And we acknowledge our need and our dependence on God. We yearn and search for wisdom. It is given to us in these scriptures and in the food prepared at this table set before us.